Hello and welcome to Sprint 134. 1 second here, I'm trying to find my screen. Um, all right, so I will do the overview, the introduction, as well as the community slide. Harpreet will present the UI slides. Adam will present us the provider slides. Jovi will present us the platform slides. And Mike Shriver can't make it, so I'll talk about the integration tests. So we got this stuff. The trend line's working again. We moved from milestones in all the repositories to milestones representing a sprint to milestones representing a release, which is kind of the more common way to do things. In order for that to happen, we had to kind of change some scripts that we run to kind of gather all this information. As you can see, one of the numbers that looks off that I have to recheck here is the red line. Seemed to drop off the last three, which is against which I ran all this stuff here. So having said that, I think we have PRs merged in 132, 133, and 134, starting to look pretty good. It's starting to get back to the pace that we were on before. The number of PRs opened is also trending up a little bit, so that's pretty cool. It's just that the PRs still open, kind of still going after review or works in progress. That's the only number that we have to double check. As for the closed by, the PRs that were closed, we had 72 bug fixes in 134. Looks like almost half the line there. 49 around enhancements, and then the rest sprinkled around refactoring, tech debt tests, and other stuff. This is the repo health report. It's kind of expanded out a little bit. Also automated getting this, so it should be easier to get going forward, as well as to start drawing trend lines for each of the repositories' health. So hopefully next time we can see actually where this is going. On the community side, we announced the release of Yansa Alpha. You can go to that link there and read all about it. One of the main things around the Yansa release is codification support. Therefore, we added a getting started guide for Kubernetes. In addition to that, we also added a documentation search to the website, and some other enhancements to the website as we actually now compute the download sizes. Before they were hard-coded and often wrong. And there's also a bunch of new guides that we exposed, both installation guides as well as a whole new section on configuration. So read up on those, give us your feedback, and we will improve them going forward together. Over to Harpreet.
Thanks, Oleg. Hello, everyone. So we had total of 37 PRs merged across the UI and other related repos. That includes 15 bug fixes, 4 enhancements, few cleanup PRs, removing obsolete code and moving things around. Highlights of the bug fixes and enhancements are listed on this slide with the links to the PRs. And on the next few slides, I have screenshots of few of the main PRs to go over. So let's go to the next slide, please. On the reconfigure VM screen, maximum disk size validation was removed from the form due to several conditions and limitations on the disks. It is difficult to determine maximum disk size prior to issuing the reconfigure request. So now we only have a minimum size validation on that field. As you can see in the screenshot on top left, previously we used to show a message indicating that the disk size should be between minimum and maximum specified values. But now you will just see the minimum size validation on that field. Next slide, please. New React delete models were implemented on auth key pair and Ansible Tower Providers screens. We had few other screens updated in the last sprint, as you can see on the screenshots here. We have the new screens that show the items being deleted with their names on the delete model. Next slide, please. And on the API side, we now have delete support for auth key pairs. That's also being used on the previous slide while deleting the auth key pairs. And support to perform check compliance action on one or more VMs was added. So I have a screenshot here with that shows the API commands for the new actions and their outputs. And that's all I have for the UI.
Over to Adam.
Thank you. So for providers this sprint, we took another chunk out of one of the core provider pluggability issues. This started out as a BZ where providers which were disabled in the permissions file, so for like a released version, if you only wanted to support certain providers, the list of catalog item types were hard-coded, and so you would see some providers which were disabled in that list. So we took the opportunity to delete that hard-coded list from core, and we moved it out into the different provider plugins. So now when you go to get the list of catalog item types for creating a catalog item, it actually just goes through the descendants, checks for which ones are supported, and then builds that list dynamically. So that makes it a lot easier to bring your own plugin without having to make any changes to core. So that was a nice enhancement. We also added the ability to syndicate metrics and events over Kafka. So right now, if you go and configure your own Kafka broker manually, in the future this will be automated, but right now if you configure a Kafka broker manually, we will publish events and metrics to those two topics. So that would let you, if you're running ManageIQ on a common platform where you want to have other components listening and reacting to the ManageIQ events and metrics, makes it a lot easier to do that with an industry standard streaming platform as opposed to having to talk to the ManageIQ API directly. You can actually just subscribe right to the Kafka topics. If you go to the next slide, we'll have a short demo of how to set that up. So the first thing you need to do is check to make sure that you have your messaging config. So this is similar to the database YAML. We can use either Kafka or Artemis, and so by default, bin setup will configure Kafka for you. If your Kafka is not on this standard location, you would have to modify that. So make sure you have a Kafka broker running. The next step is to go to advanced settings and change your messaging type. By default, this is MIQQ, which means we won't publish anything additionally. If you change it to Kafka or Artemis, then we will publish events and metrics there. So I'm just going to start a simple Kafka consumer. And you can see I'm going to look for events. And if we go to a provider, and let's kick a VM restart just to trigger an event. And we'll go over here. So this is from beginning, so you can see a previous event, but I added some new lines so you can see the new ones coming in. So see we logged in, and then there's a reset virtual machine event. So there should be enough data in here to be able to figure out exactly what's going on without having to go back to the ManageIQ API too much. And that's it for that. Next slide. On the OpenStack side, we found an issue when using a non-Red Hat or OOO OpenStack, specifically a canonical microstack setup. They deploy the Keystone service without a region, even if there's only one region, which is different than what the other OpenStack distributions do. This is causing us an issue. If you provided a region when you were adding your OpenStack, it would fail to get the list of tenants to use. So what we ended up doing was not passing a region at all when talking to the Keystone service, and that allows you to use canonical microstack, which is a nice lightweight OpenStack provider. So if you just want to essentially like a Minikube setup on your local laptop, you can do a microstack on your laptop and use that for local OpenStack provider development. Overt fixed an association between a VM's NIC and an external OVN network manager. So the overt provider uses the OVN network manager from OpenStack. but there are some differences in the way that the parser was working. So if a VM had a NIC on one of those OVN external networks, we weren't actually creating the association, which was causing some failures for some customers. So now Overt will successfully connect a NIC from Overt to the OVN network. Next slide. The big one here, OpenShift, we added support for OpenShift 4. So in case you don't know, OpenShift is a set of enhancements on top of Kubernetes. So previously we had the Kubernetes provider and the OpenShift provider, and the difference was the OpenShift provider used a different endpoint. There was a /o API for all of the OpenShift collections. OpenShift 4 got rid of that, deprecated it. They now use the standard Kubernetes API groups, and all of the OpenShift additions are just different custom resources. So we didn't support that for a long time, but in this sprint, we switched over to using those API groups in that OpenShift provider, and so now OpenShift 4 is supported. And along with that, we also added instructions for using code-ready containers, which is essentially a mini shift for OpenShift 4. So you can go to the guides link there to get a nice list on how to actually set that up. If you go to the next slide, we will have a demo of using code-ready containers specifically, but would be the same for any OpenShift 4 provider that you wanted to add.
Oops. 1 second.
Quick demo.
There we go.
Cool. All right, so we're going to go right from CRC start. I already had this started, so it was a lot faster, but it would usually take a couple of minutes to set all this up the first time. The next thing you do is get your admin credentials. And we'll do that, and you can see we were logged into the cluster. We can see all the OpenShift projects. And now we're going to go over to Manage IQ. Oh, sorry, we're going to look at the OpenShift 4 console. So just to prove this isn't an OpenShift 3, this obviously looks different. See some projects, some deployments, and then we can go to the About and see the version. It's a 4.3, yep, 4.3.8 there. So previously this would not have worked. It would have failed to verify. You still could use Kubernetes, but you couldn't have used the OpenShift on top of it. Biggest difference is the API port is 6.4.4.3 instead of 8.4.4.3 because it's all in the same API endpoint. And so we have that running, so we can do a refresh. And Jeopardy music, wait a little bit. And there's all of the entities on our OpenShift 4 cluster. And take a look at the pods just to see that everything's really there. And there we go. And that's it for providers. Over to Jovi for platform.
Nice demos, Adam. Good job. In the platform space, there were 40 PRs merged this sprint, with Satoe making a couple of enhancements to the build environment. For bugs, Adam addressed a no-class exception in MIQQ's messaging client by handling the condition where no environment variables are set and no configuration messaging YAML existed. Adam also fixed an issue where disabling EMSs would show up as available catalog types. Keenan addressed an issue where the code to derive the class name for Vim Performance Daily was just plain wrong. He also addressed an error that occurred when assigning VMs to a storage profile. And he addressed a couple of Ruby on Rails 5.2 related bugs. I fixed a bug where support for ED25519 cipher sign keys was missing from the appliance console. Next slide, please. There were a lot of PRs merged into the Manage IQ Pods repo this sprint. Nick C, I discussed it with him, and he suggested that I summarize them by simply stating that he, Guang Ya, if I pronounced your name wrong, please let me know, and Mark Lee contributed enhancements and improvements to the Manage IQ operator. And Guang Ya added an issue and template to the Manage IQ pod repo. Next slide, please. Brandon, Keenan, and Lucy addressed various technical debt. Nick L., Brandon, and Jason contributed multiple changes to our continuous integration and testing framework. Noteworthy are actually a couple made by Jason, one to include Rubocop config files during Haml lint, and another to update Travis to confirm that the Manage IQ Pods operator compiles. And that's it for the platform space, and on to testing. Next slide, please.
Sure. And on the integration test space, the Vita's automated test for the service dialogues, regex validation, and element load values on init behavior. And there were tests added for dashboard on global and remote appliances. Matus added automated test cases for Amazon targeted refresh and behavior on removal of cloud network providers. Tassos fixed the test VM retire extend type error and behavior of the PyTest CLI args. And Yaroslav fixed OpenStack volume tests and refactored some other tests. And that's it for integration tests. And I think that brings this sprint review to a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for making it happen. Thank you for all the contributors, all the reviewers, and all the presenters. And we will see you next time.